to Leader You by Black River Performance Management, where we believe work should fuel the human spirit, not drain it. In this leadership podcast, we will dive into the lived experiences of people flourishing in today's workplace and beyond. Join us to hear real-life examples of experiences from our own lives and from the leaders we know and trust. Thank you for joining us on the Leader You podcast. Today, I have the pleasure of introducing a dear new friend to me, Dr. Joelle Calton. Joelle is a seeker of growth, joy, and connection who enjoys travel, self-exploration, food, wine, laughter, and deep conversation. She received her doctorate in clinical psychology in 2000 and since that time has built a thriving clinical practice. Along the way, she also became an equine-assisted psychotherapist, a psilocybin-assisted practitioner, a teacher, and a clinical consultant. Joelle has facilitated experiences for men, women, couples, and groups. She's excited about next steps in her career expansion. She currently lives in Northern California with her husband and stepson and also spends time in Baja and in Maine. So thank you, Joelle, for joining us. I'm so excited to have you here on the Leader You podcast.
Thank you.
Yes, I am. The reason I had you on the podcast, or I wanted to have you on the podcast, is because we kind of had a soulful connection right when we met. Whenever you go to a retreat, don't you feel like you just skip all of the surface stuff and drop right in with people into this place where you're just wanting to, put everything aside and all the BS aside and just get to know somebody and where they are and meet them right there?
Yeah. Yeah, and there's always a couple people, right? There's always a couple people that are particularly attractive. I don't mean physically attractive, but I'm attracted to that I want to get to know.
Absolutely. And I think that might be an energy or an essence that it just feels like you click. And I feel like that's what happened when I met you, and then you just kept blowing me away more and more as I got to learn more. And then I've gotten the opportunity to get to know you a little deeper and I got to spend some time with you recently down in Baja. And I just, the more I get to know you, the more I want to know. And the more I am also learning that I dropped in at a soul level and I don't really know you on a surface level as much, right? Like the stuff you normally get to know about people.
Yeah.
We kind of went backwards. And so I'm curious if you want to share. We're going to talk about the hero's journey, where that comes from. So we met at the MEA retreat at Dacker's workshop, which was where we dropped in and started this friendship. But one of the things that I noticed was when going through the workbook, I had heard Chip Conley talking about hero's journey and was following through in the workbook. And then I saw your hero's journey. And as I looked at it, I couldn't help but see parallel lives. And I thought that you might be someone that could explain what this hero's journey is and just kind of give our listeners some wisdom as to how you've recognized patterns in your life and all of that stuff.
Yeah. Well, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks for inviting me on.
Yes.
So the best, kind of the easiest way that I can explain the hero's journey, it is a story, it is a narrative, it's used in tons of literature, and it is a way to describe someone's journey into or transition into adulthood or into a realization. And you see it in the Star Wars, you see it in The Wizard of Oz, you see it in The Lord of the Rings, and typically, and it's in tons of stories, and it's in both mythological stories and in current stories. There's a story in the Bible about the prodigal son, about how the son leaves and comes back, right? And there's this story, it is a myth, it's called a monomyth, this one myth that a person leaves. They typically have a calling.
Mm-hmm.
So they're called, they leave what is known and what is familiar, and then they go through all of these trials and tribulations and all of these tests, and then they learn something. There's oftentimes despair, confusion, depression, and then they learn something, culminating in coming back with the wisdom that they gained on the hero's journey. So that is the typical kind of trajectory of what the hero's journey is. I think the reason Chip asked me to write about my hero's journey, it was not that. Mine was a little messier. And when you see the hero's journey in a diagram, it's a circle, and mine was more zigzaggy.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that sometimes when we are asked to write down our hero's journey, and when Chip asked me for my heroine's journey,
Mm-hmm.
I should say, is that I immediately felt nervous. I
Mm-hmm.
immediately felt really self-conscious because I didn't have the opportunity to go away to college. I didn't have the invitation or the calling to do something great, to go into the military, to go work at an orphanage in a foreign country. I didn't have those opportunities. And really, quite frankly, I didn't even have any options. But the one thing I had is I knew that there was possibility. And even though I didn't have any options given to me, I did know that there were possibilities. But every decision I made was in reaction
Yeah.
to something, and I wasn't being called or pulled. I was pushing and screaming. And so it was a little bit messier. My heroine's journey is a little bit messier than the ones in the movies.
I resemble that remark.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes. Yes.
As I said, it was pretty revealing to see I'm pretty messy too. Hot mess sometimes,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
it's cool. It all of that polishes the pearl, right? No mud, no lotus type thing. And
Yeah. Yeah.
so when you think of, so Joseph Campbell is the one who made the hero's journey kind of the famous, right?
Well known. Mhm.
Well known. And so for our listeners, they could pull up a diagram. You could literally Google it or pull it up on Wikipedia, and it shows you how it looks. And so do you want to walk people through like kind of your story, but through using the hero's journey?
Yeah.
Okay.
Wow. Where do I start? So I think so the first kind of step to the hero's journey is a call, like a call to adventure. In my case, it was a call for survival. I grew up in abject poverty. Um, I was the youngest of four. My parents divorced when I was 3, and my father took my 3 siblings, and I went with my mother. My mom didn't have a job. We were living in friends' basements and in trailers, many trailers actually,
Mm-hmm.
and a lot of time in migrant housing. I grew up in an agricultural community, and so while my father and my siblings were thriving in a suburb of San Francisco, my mother and I were really struggling and really suffering. A lot of food insecurities, which comes up for me to this day,
Mm-hmm.
and just a lot of scarcity and lack. Um, and so my father, when I was 14, saw that I had some potential. And so he asked me to live with him, move in with him so I could go to a good high school. That fell apart pretty quickly. And at that point, his wife at the time asked him to make a decision between me and her, and he chose her. So at 14, he sat me down and said to me, "I disown you as my daughter," and sent me back to live with my mother in this really depressing and very um, despair producing town. And so I dropped out of high school. I moved back in with my mom. And at that point, I started high school there. And I came home and I said to my mom, if I stay in this town, I will die. Um, I know that I will be addicted to something,
Mm-hmm.
drugs, alcohol, love, gambling. I will be addicted to something. I know that right off the bat.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think I will live. So for me, my call for adventure was actually a call for survival.
Mm-hmm.
And I begged my mom to move to a place where I could get a better education. And we kind of pulled some stuff together, and the two of us moved into a house with a bunch of other people. And I was given the opportunity to go to a high school, really good high school, which saved my life.
Wow.
And because then it was it was my first taste of academics. I wasn't good at sports. I got bullied a lot, so I wasn't very popular. But I knew that if I could study and if I knew that I could stay on track, that I'd be okay.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was my call. It was a call for survival. And then through the years, through high school and after high school again, I didn't have the opportunity to go away to college. We didn't have the money, and it wasn't a conversation we ever had. So I started waiting tables, and I've been working since I was 14. So I started waiting tables, and but knowing that there was always something I was supposed to do. So, oh my gosh, Angie, I started and quit college 7 times.
Mm-hmm.
I'd take one class at community college, I would drop it. It would be too hard, I would drop it.
Mm-hmm.
I'd get distracted, I would drop it. I'd fall in love with someone, I would drop it. Like I couldn't get traction.
You're on the bottom of Maslow's hierarchy.
I'm at the bottom. I
Yeah.
was at the bottom. And I knew I could see the tip though. I couldn't see it,
You knew
but I
it.
knew it was possible.
Yeah.
Right? I
Exactly.
knew it was
Yep.
possible. And that's what I'm saying. I didn't have any options to get up the chart, but I knew the possibility that it was there.
Mm-hmm.
And so the trials and tribulations that I go to on this journey is tons of failure, feeling like an outsider, lack of worthiness,
Mm-hmm.
scarcity and lack. And then in my 20s, my dad came back into my life after that relationship ended with that woman. He came back into my life and said he was sorry or whatever. And he reminded me, you're smart. And I know you don't feel like you're good at very many things, but you're smart and you have to use your brain.
Mm-hmm.
And so he invited me and gave me permission to try again to go back to school. And I failed 3 more times. I dropped out 3 more times. And again, like when I think about the hero's journey, I didn't really meet a mentor, but at that point in my life, there's one of the steps is meeting a mentor. And at that point, my dad dropped in at the right moment to say, I want to remind you that you can do this. I want to remind you that you're capable. So at that point, he was the mentor. And then I dropped back in. And I started kind of getting my allies together, which is another part of the journey. I started kind of gathering my team of people to support me. And then I was able finally, after several attempts at getting my undergrad and 3 failed attempts at getting a good graduate degree, I finally was able to kind of push myself through, really, really scrapping along to be able to finish my education. And the first one in my family to finish a master's and then eventually a PhD.
That's so incredible. I hope you're proud of you for that hard
Thanks.
work and that grit.
Yeah. It's difficult, right? Because it's always seen through the lens, unfortunately, of my failures. And as anybody that's listening to this podcast know, I don't know if people are aware, but there's this whole thing called imposter syndrome. And when you have scrapped your whole life and you've had to rely on, quite frankly, I'll be honest, a little bit of manipulation, persuasion, whatever it took to stay alive and to survive, let alone thrive. That's different.
Mm-hmm.
But just to survive, you go through, even going through all of the education and going through all the steps of this journey, even though I'm at the end of it and there's still patterns that exist, of course, I still feel like I'm an imposter. I still feel like someone can come and take it away from me at any moment.
Hmm.
And
Thank
that's
you
even
for
after
sharing
all
that.
the years of education and all the years of therapy,
Mm-hmm.
all the self-improvement, all the books,
Right.
that there are these patterns of you're still that poor 8-year-old in hand-me-down clothes, living in migrant housing, embarrassed to go to school,
Right. It's a constraint that you still haven't completely healed or dropped, right?
Yeah. And when that little girl comes up, she'll never go away, and I need her.
Mm-hmm.
But when she shows up, she shows up at times where I need to get back into my heart center. I need to get back into what is real. I need to connect with people who mirror back to me what reality is.
Yeah, that's incredible.
Yeah.
Well, I just love hearing your story, and I'm so sorry for the suffering, and I'm also so grateful because it's made such a pearl, right? A gem. Someone who can empathize with other people and who can see and who can feel energy, and you have superpowers because of the way you were raised.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So, what kind of patterns showed up for you?
Yeah. Like, even though, I mean, at the very end of the heroine's journey, the hero's journey, it's like this freedom to live, right? And so that's the gift that I feel like now I do have options, whereas before I really had none. And so I do feel like on the positive that I have options, I can generate options, I have resources, I have support. I have people who knew me back then. My best friend from second grade is still a friend of mine. So she's there to constantly mirror back to me who I was
Yeah.
and who I've become. So it's nice to have that. So the positive patterns are the patterns of resiliency, the
Mm-hmm.
patterns of that I know that I'm going to be okay.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the patterns of I have lost before, I have failed before, and I'm going to be okay. That
Mm-hmm.
it may not always look like the way that I want it to look, but I'm going to be protected and I'm going to be supported and I'm going to make it. I have made it and I will continue to make it. So those are the positive
Mm-hmm.
patterns. Some of the more challenging patterns, I'm
Mm-hmm.
not going to say negative, but the
Mm-hmm.
more challenging patterns
Mm-hmm.
are the patterns of lack of self-worth,
Mm-hmm.
scarcity and lack.
Mm-hmm.
I get made fun of all the time because I had so much food insecurity that when I go on airplanes, even if it's a 2 hour plane ride, I'm like a mule. I'm like packed with all of this food. And people say, you know, it's only a 2 hour airplane ride. I'm like, we could be stuck on the tarmac. We could get, you know, we could be what's it called when you take the plane, not kidnapped. We could be
Yeah, hijacked.
hijacked, and the people are like, wow, we're only going to Disney, we're only going to LA, lady, or so. But like, and so it's, and I laugh about it now, but I realize that I still have some of that food
Yeah.
insecurity and that, and then my relationship with money has been an ongoing challenge,
Mm-hmm.
and the flow of money and how I relate to money and how I think I will always have a scarcity mindset, not in the energy of money, but just in that I'm always going to be looking for that bargain. I'm always going
Mm-hmm.
to be looking for the deal. I'm always
Mm-hmm.
going to be like, again, just being a little bit scrappy.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so that I think that will always be there. And sometimes I allow myself to breaks from it, but it is part of kind of it's in my DNA. And where I grew up, you know, the food is in the dirt and the water that I drank from the well, like it's in my DNA. Scarcity and lack is in my DNA. That's all that town had to offer,
Yeah.
right? And lack of options. And so it's just about how I relate to that, you
Yeah.
know, and that's where the resiliency and the trust and believing that if I kind of stay attuned, that I'm going to be okay. So it's a constant dance between those two sides.
Yeah, absolutely. And such an important aspect to remember that, you can have one, you're going to have both. You're not going to get rid of everything. But one thing I noticed, because as I've been going through this and listening to you share your journey, just inspires me to want to articulate mine in such a beautiful way. But what I get out of this is that you really have put in a lot of work. I mean, not only education wise, but you're a therapist, psychotherapist, right?
Yeah.
And so you've not only been doing the work, but this is the work, the trenches that you live in and have been working in for years and helping people to overcome some of the same types of challenges. And it's super helpful when you've actually been there, right? And done some of that stuff. How does that show up as a help for you when you can really relate and empathize? How does that show up for you?
Yeah. There's a great saying, like, if you feel helpless, help someone.
Mm-hmm.
I think there have been so many times in my life where I have felt helpless, and I always come back to my work. Like in those moments, I remember one time in a particularly dark time in my life, one of my friends said, "What do you want to do right now?" I said, "I want to go to work." Because when I can put myself in another person's situation, when I can put myself in another person's shoes, knowing what I've known and learning what I've learned and being in the trenches, that I can get down in the trenches with them.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And I know that I can be of support to them. And sometimes I'm a cheerleader. Sometimes I'm a teacher. Sometimes I'm just a listener, but I know that I can get down in the trenches with them. And I'm not going to, there's not going to be any skin off my nose. Like
Mm-hmm.
I can do it effortlessly.
Mm-hmm.
That I am not one of those people who, carry all of that along with me. Like, and get taken down. Like I can get into the trenches with you. I can get in the trenches with everybody and like, let's do this,
Mm-hmm.
whatever that means for you. So I will meet you where you are and say like, what do you need from me right now?
Mm-hmm.
And just knowing that I can pull from those reserves and I get depleted sometimes, but
Mm-hmm.
for the most part, I can pull from those reserves and be who that person needs me to be in that moment.
Has
And I'm
that
not a typical therapist where I'm like, how does that make you feel? Or I'm very active.
mm-hmm.
I'm, I'm very involved.
Yeah, I've been wondering if you've been analyzing me the
I just like you.
Thanks. Uh, and even if you are, I mean, it's like, I know, like, therapy is a good thing. And that's one thing that I'd like to get rid of this myth that it's for weak people or it's for people who, uh, sometimes there's a stigma that goes along with therapy. And I know that I'm unusual, that I seek therapy, that I don't ever think I'm done, that
Yeah.
this soul has not arrived. I mean, I as a being am complete and whole, but the skills and the perspectives and the beliefs can always use some honing in on, right?
Yeah. And sometimes what I say to people is life is hard. It's particularly hard right now
Mm-hmm.
and hard for so many people. And if someone's thinking about therapy and what am I going to get out of it, or are they going to tell me what to do, or am I going to feel better? I don't know the answers to those questions. But what I can offer as a therapist and what I can offer hopefully to other people is let someone take this burden for you,
Mm-hmm.
even if it's for 50 minutes a week or every 2 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
I tell my clients, I am like a nuclear waste site, like come in and give me everything. I can handle it.
Mm-hmm.
Part of my experience, part of my life experience, part of my education, part of my work is like, let me take this from you.
Mm-hmm.
And if nothing else, just let someone hold the ball for you
Mm-hmm.
for 50 minutes a week, where
Right.
you can come in and just say, please take this. Please let me kind of throw up all over you and I just and I'm like, yes, give it to me. Let
Mm-hmm.
me hold this for you.
Yeah.
And because our friends are good at that, but we don't want to do that to our friends all the
Mm-hmm.
time, right? And so the wisdom and the relief and the knowledge will come, but just to show up for yourself and say, I am worthy of this. I'm
Mm-hmm.
worthy of 50 minutes, 45 minutes every 2 weeks to go and have somebody hold space for me,
Yeah.
bear witness for me and
Mm-hmm.
my story and my pain and my struggles.
Mm-hmm.
It is that alone is so healing that it doesn't
Absolutely.
have to be the outcome that you want. It doesn't have to be like, oh, I need to walk out of here feeling happy. Sometimes it's just like I have another human being bearing witness.
Mm-hmm.
That a neutral party, that is someone that isn't invested in how I behave or have some idea about who I should be, except be committed to me being the highest version of myself,
Yeah.
right?
That's
That
so
is
good.
a gift that I want to offer people
Mm-hmm.
to take for themselves,
Mm-hmm. And I think sometimes we do unload on people without all those skills, like a hairdresser, like a
Yeah.
personal trainer. Like, I mean, I've been in roles where people tell me things that I don't need to know. I don't know them on that in-depth of a level. And I know I'm a natural helper and people can, and in coaching for sure, that kind of stuff comes up. But I've been in lots of roles where, like I said, I used to do personal training, and sometimes that would end up feeling like a therapy session, but I didn't have the tools or the knowledge or wisdom to lead them down any kind of path at that point in my life, right? And
I
I
was a
did.
bartender for years. I get
Yes,
it. I had a lot of training to be a shrink.
yes, exactly. Bartender, as a hairstylist,
Yep.
you name it. Those are the places where people bare their souls. And it's great that they have that connection. But oftentimes those people don't have the skills to help you level up. They're a good
Yeah.
listening person. And but if you're looking for skill development, I think that's where therapy or getting rid of past pains and things like that is
Yeah.
different than just, having somebody to vent to when you got in a fight with your spouse and you're just trying to get it off your chest and then you'll be fine, right?
Yeah. Yep. Yep.
Yeah.
And sometimes, and we need all of it. We need
Yeah.
someone to vent to, we need someone to cheer for us, we need someone to challenge us, we need it all.
Yep.
And if we have it in our resources, we also everyone could really benefit from someone that's just there, just for us, to be all those things
Mm-hmm.
whenever we need it, and to create that space of psychological safety
Mm-hmm.
where they can, at least for a little bit of time, feel safe
Mm-hmm.
and feel heard and feel held
Mm-hmm.
psychologically. And I think bartenders and hairdressers and coaches in a
Mm-hmm.
professional setting, or personal trainers, they can't do it energetically because they're in these two worlds
Mm-hmm.
also,
Yeah.
right? And so I just think it's really important to have at least that once in your life, to just have the experience of just being held in that really sacred, beautiful, helpful, psychological safe space.
I love that. And now it's so much easier to get somebody online, right? To have help. You doesn't even have to be somebody in your neck of the woods. It could be a complete person that you just build this relationship online with, and have someone just like we're talking, deep conversations, and just drop in just like that from your home or from your
Yeah.
car.
And there is, I mean, I think we all are getting used to talking on the computer. There is digital intimacy.
Mm-hmm.
I can create digital intimacy with somebody, and it's different and it looks different, and it feels different, but it can be there. And
Mm-hmm.
right now, especially with just how much people are struggling, just any kind of intimacy that feels safe to them, I just really encourage people to seek out.
I hope that the people that are listening to the podcast now or who will listen to this in the future see this as an opportunity of ways that they can get support that they need, remove barriers and beliefs about what they might have believed before, just by listening to you share your story, sharing your vulnerability, being in this psychologically safe place where we can have a conversation that goes deep pretty quickly. And there's a lot of care and concern for one another and holding each other and those types of things. I hope, if nothing else, it bears witness to the fact that this is a possibility for everyone. And I can tell you, I wouldn't be where I am today if I didn't work on my stuff inside out. I'm not talking about the external, and that's what our society focuses on, is all the external success. But I'm talking about this hard work that's more like, what are my triggers? What am I afraid of? How does my little girl behave? Right, like all of those types of things. Like, what are my behaviors, and understanding and becoming more self-aware, and having somebody with you on that journey that can, like you said, have a team. Like you
Yeah.
said, one person can't be it for you. We have a
Right.
lot of diverse needs.
Yeah, and I think that coming back to kind of the hero's journey, perhaps this conversation for someone, this could be a call to action, which is the first,
Yeah.
which is the first step. They could see you as or me as a potential mentor in this
Mm-hmm.
conversation. This can be an invitation, which is also part of the hero's journey, an invitation for an adventure.
Mm-hmm.
And so to come back to kind of where everybody is on a path on our own kind of personal journey, this conversation could be one of the 14 steps on someone's journey, should they choose to see it. And the way that I like to look at it, and the way that I kind of check in with myself every day is, I'm messy and I am broken and stuff's going to come up. And all I want to do in my searching is just, I want to be the best version of me I can be.
Mm-hmm.
I can't be anybody else. And so, and I am just always striving, like, what is the best version that for me? What is the
Mm-hmm.
best version of me that I can be every day? And that's what I commit to. And sometimes she's feisty,
Mm-hmm.
and sometimes she's fiery, and sometimes she oversteps, you
Mm-hmm.
know? And in that moment, that's exactly what she needed to do. But I just know that that's and to do that, to be the best version of yourself, takes lifelong learning
For
and
sure.
lifelong introspection. And it changes, you know. So
Yeah,
hopefully
absolutely.
this will be a call.
I think it is. It is. And you've inspired me to, this is a call to action for me. I want to get my hero's journey dialed in, be able to share it in such an eloquent way, because I think it's important to be able to articulate it. I understand what happened, but I can't articulate it quite in that manner yet, right?
Mhm.
I don't have a language for it. But I can see the parallels and the patterns, but I haven't made the script that I want to say it in. And so I'm committed to that, and you can hold me accountable to it.
I will do.
You're like, you bet your bet I will.
Oh, yeah.
All right. So I'm so grateful for you being on the podcast. And how could people reach you? What, oh, and one other thing that we like to end on is, if you could tell your younger self, some words of wisdom, what would those be? Your 20-year-old self.
Yeah. Gosh, so much. But really at the end of the day, Angie, I just need to be told that that I'm okay and that it's going to be okay.
Mm-hmm.
It's like just to really know that. Um, there's so much safety in that,
Mm-hmm.
that I'm okay.
You are. You're held.
Okay. Yeah, I'm out.
Mm-hmm. That's good.
Just exhale.
Yeah.
Just exhale.
Yeah. So how would people reach you? Where are you?
I'm
Online,
yeah.
online and in the world.
In the world, I'm in Northern California and in Mexico and in Maine. I get around. And yeah, in the show notes, I'll have my email that people can reach out to me if they'd like. Um, and yeah, if I can
Okay.
support anybody in any way.
Okay. Well, thank you for being on the Leader You podcast and for sharing your wisdom.
Thanks for
I
having me.
appreciate it.